Wednesday morning, 10:30 a.m. Charalambos Theologou, Bobby the Greek, to everyone who mattered, sits by the window of a Starbucks in Laval. The phone on the table buzzes once, then falls silent. He doesn't answer. Across the parking lot, a black SUV circles once, then stops. He doesn't flinch. Maybe he's seen it before. Maybe he thinks this one's here for someone else. Two masked men step through the door. 29 rounds tear through the café, glass shattering. People diving for cover, coffee spilling into blood. But this wasn't a street beef. It wasn't revenge. It was coordination. A correction ordered by men who weren't even free to walk outside. The call that ended his life came from inside the Rizzuto network, from the same walls that once guaranteed his safety. He thought he was surrounded by allies. He was surrounded by architects. Miss the button? Go ahead. Subscribe now so you don't forget later. His name was Charalambos Theologou, born in Montreal on February 26, 1983. By 40, he'd mastered a kind of survival most men don't live long enough to understand. The streets called him Bobby the Greek. He wasn't a boss and he wasn't a soldier. He was the one who made the bosses talk and the soldiers stop shooting. A broker, a man who traded favors like currency, one phone call at a time. In Montreal's underworld, that made him valuable. The Rizzuto crime family trusted him to move product. The Hells Angels, led by Martin Robert, used him to settle debts quietly. And the street crews, Arab Power and Team Tupac Adna, paid him to keep their names off police scanners. For years he balanced it perfectly, until he became too connected to control. Police called him a facilitator. His rivals called him untouchable. But the truth? No one stays untouchable when everyone has your number. He started traveling with bodyguards, checking mirrors, changing routines. The whispers had already started, that he'd stopped working for one side, or worse, started working for himself. And in a city where loyalty is currency, independence is suicide. Because in Montreal's underworld, power isn't measured in muscle. It's measured in who answers your calls. So how did the man who connected everyone end up completely alone? Did he forget who he worked for, or finally decide to stop working for anyone? Either way, the moment he drew his own line, someone decided it had to be erased. And when it happened, the city barely blinked. In Montreal, balance doesn't collapse overnight, it erodes. One call at a time, one silence too long. After Vito Rizzuto died on December 23, 2013, the hierarchy cracked. His son Leonardo Rizzuto inherited the throne, and every enemy that came with it. Behind bars, Leo's orders were still reaching the street. But the further they traveled, the dirtier they became. That's where Charalambos Theologou, Bobby the Greek, came in. He wasn't family. He wasn't patched. He was the bridge that kept the peace between men who hated each other more than they feared prison. Drug routes, cash drops, extortion lists. Bobby was the broker who made sure the money kept moving, no matter who was fighting for it. His main contacts were high-ranking lieutenants in the Rizzuto network. But the underworld doesn't do loyalty. It does leverage. And the moment Bobby started earning faster than the men above him, he became part of the problem he used to solve. Across the river, Team Tupac Adna, also known as the Rat Pack, was splintering. The Arab Power crew, their longtime allies, turned on each other. One week they were partners. The next, one of their own lieutenants was found in a burned-out Audi on the Ville-Marie Expressway. The message was clear. Someone was cleaning house. By spring 2023, small tremors had appeared. Deals fell through. Phones went dark. A member of Arab Power crew turned up dead in late April. Police said he'd been shot in broad daylight. Bobby heard both the message and the meaning. He began to notice tails through Chamadé. Cars that mirrored his turns. Headlights that waited too long. He switched routines, added new guards, and started driving a bulletproof Escalade. But even steel doesn't stop information. On June 5, 2023, police found a torched SUV in Rivière des Prairies. The same model seemed tailing his route. Inside prison, investigators later found encrypted messages traced to Rizzuto lieutenants. Each text shorter than the one before. One simply read, "Clear window." On the street, rumor became direction. By August, everyone knew the story. The next target drank coffee at 10:30 every morning. Bobby brushed it off. "If they wanted me gone," he told a friend, "I wouldn't still be here to hear about it." Confidence or denial? Because when you live off secrets, you stop noticing who's keeping theirs. On October 4th, 2023, surveillance teams tracked a black SUV circling his route. Same plate seen near his Laval condo days earlier. Every sign pointed to a storm coming, yet he still showed up, same table, same seat, same window. Because in his mind, routine wasn't risk. Routine was control. What he didn't realize was that the control was already gone. The order had left the prison hours earlier. It moved faster than loyalty, louder than warning. And when the shooters arrived, they weren't looking for a fight. They were confirming an appointment. Quick reminder, if you're still watching, the moment of impact is next. Wednesday, October 4th, 2023, 10:15 a.m. Charalambos Theologou leaves his condo in Chaumet-Laval. Same gray tracksuit, same black Escalade. Routine, the only thing he still controlled. On the surface, he looked calm. Inside, he was fraying. For weeks, his phone had been vibrating with silence. Messages left unread. Calls returned too late. Even men who owed him money had stopped showing up. The last clear message he received came from an associate inside Bordeaux prison. "Lay low, they're cleaning house." But Bobby never hid. He built a career on being visible, on walking through fire and pretending it was light. 10:25 a.m. He parks outside the Starbucks on Boulevard Saint-Martin Ouest. Same space he used every morning. Two men step out with him, his bodyguards, both mid-30s, both ex-bikers. They take the corner booth. He orders a small black coffee, like always. Surveillance later showed he glanced toward the parking lot twice and smiled. Maybe he recognized the vehicle. Maybe he thought it was backup. 10:30 a.m., a black SUV glides in, slows, stops near the glass. Two masked men step out, both in dark jackets, both moving like they'd done this before. Inside, customers scroll phones, oblivious. Theologou leans forward, phone in hand, mid-text. For a second, he looks up, straight toward the door. Friends would later say he hadn't slept for days. He told one of them that even the Hells Angels had reassured him. It's street-level noise, not us. But Bobby knew better. He'd seen too many men comforted right before their names disappeared. He still came anyway, because habit can feel safer than hiding until it isn't. 10:31 a.m. The first shot shatters the window. 28 more follow. Witnesses say there was no shouting, no warning, just precision. Two shooters, 2 minutes, then gone. When police arrived, they found his coffee still warm. And later, in the investigation, one question refused to fade. Who told them exactly where he'd be? Someone inside his circle had drawn the map. 10:31 a.m., Wednesday, October 4th, 2023. The door opens. Two men walk in. Calm, deliberate, rehearsed. One heads straight for Charalambos Theologou. The other turns and locks eyes on the exit. For 3 seconds, everything inside that cafe is normal. Steam hissing, phones buzzing, someone laughing near the counter. Then, 29 rounds. The glass erupts, chairs split, coffee pours into blood. Bobby drops beside the table, the same seat he'd taken every morning. His bodyguard reaches for his weapon, but never makes it. The other dives to shield him, hit twice before the first scream breaks the silence. The shooters don't shout. They don't run. They finish the job, pivot, and leave through the same door they entered. Witnesses remember the smell of espresso mixed with gunpowder. 10:33 a.m. A black SUV pulls out of the lot, turns east toward Highway 440. and vanishes. Police arrive minutes later. Inside, shattered glass, 2 wounded men, 1 dead. Outside, tire marks and a city already whispering a single question: who would dare hit a Rizzuto broker in daylight? Investigators from the Sûreté du Québec take over before noon. Within hours, they find a vehicle burning in Rivière des Prairies, reduced to a metal cage still hot enough to warp. Same model, same plates. Forensics confirm 9mm casings, fired from modified Glock 18s, fully automatic handguns, often used in contract hits tied to organized crime. But the precision bothered detectives. Too clean, too short. Ballistics reports showed controlled bursts, not panic fire, a professional job, likely military-trained or ex-enforcement. One detail changed the direction of the case. Security footage from the plaza caught the reflection of a shooter in the café glass. The mask design traced to an Italian manufacturer known for custom work, supplied only to high-level buyers in Europe. It was the kind of clue you don't find in random street beef. Later that day, detectives traced a phone ping from Rivière des Prairies to a contact already on a wiretap, a number linked to an inmate inside Bordeaux prison, which meant the call hadn't come from the street at all. It had come from inside, a hit called from prison, carried out with precision, and cleaned before police even cordoned off the scene. In less than 2 minutes, the man who connected everyone was erased. But the trail he left behind, that reflection, that phone ping, those names would expose something far larger than a single hit. Because what police found next pointed straight back to the Rizzuto network and a war run from behind bars. By 2 p.m., October 4, 2023, the Sûreté du Québec's organized crime division had taken control of the scene. Not because of the chaos, but because of the precision. 29 shell casings, 2 shooters, 1 vehicle, already burning 20 kilometers away in Rivière des Prairies. Investigators found traces of gasoline mixed with acetone, the same accelerant used in at least 3 unsolved mafia vehicle dumps since 2020. It wasn't random, it was ritual. By 6 p.m., a forensic team pulled cell data from towers around the café. One number kept reappearing, linked to a known Rizzuto associate currently detained inside Bordeaux prison. That single ping reframed the entire case, because it meant the order didn't come from the street. It came from inside. Police traced the contact chain outward. Baldi Barbero, Pietro Diadamo, both high-ranking lieutenants in the Rizzuto network, both already under surveillance for narcotics and extortion. The same week Bobby was killed, investigators intercepted encrypted messages between their accounts. One line stood out: work finished, window closed. When detectives showed the data to federal prosecutors, the reply was short. That's not street chatter. That's command. Behind bars? Leonardo Rizzuto denied involvement, but multiple sources inside correctional facilities said he'd been meeting with Barbara's cousin just days before the shooting. The pattern became impossible to ignore. The encrypted line left the prison at 9:57 a.m., bounced through a prepaid SIM registered in Laval, and cut off completely by 10:33 a.m., the exact moment the shooters fled. For investigators, it was more than coincidence. It was choreography. Within 48 hours, the RCMP's Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit quietly joined the case. A senior officer leaked one phrase to the media: "This hit was called in from behind bars." And for the first time, even Montreal's underworld whispered the same theory, that Bobby the Greek had been executed not for betrayal, but for knowing too much. He wasn't silenced for what he did. He was silenced for what he'd seen. Because every message, every shipment, every handshake he brokered tied back to the same family name. The phone pinged near the scene, but the voice giving orders came from a cell, and that raised a question no one wanted to answer. Why would Rizzuto hit his own broker? Inside Bordeaux prison, hierarchy doesn't stop, it mutates. Orders still flow, alliances still shift, and every silence means something. Word spread quickly. Charalambos Theologou, Bobby the Greek, had started moving deals without clearance. To the incarcerated Rizzuto leadership, that wasn't initiative. It was rebellion. He'd begun cutting side arrangements, brokering shipments directly between Arab power crew and Hell's Angels, using his own intermediaries. To the men who built the empire, that was a sin greater than betrayal. It was independence. Investigators revisited an old file from 2019, the Dirty Diaz murder, a case that tied a Rizzuto faction to Arab power shooters through one middleman, Theologou. Back then, the connection went unnoticed. But when Bobby's name resurfaced in 2023, the dots formed a map. Inside the prison walls, that file became a weapon. The Hells Angels hadn't forgotten that job. One of their associates had been targeted in the fallout, a loss they still blamed on misdirection and deceit. And when they found out Bobby was the one who brokered the link, the balance that kept peace between biker and mafia cracked again. To repair it, the Rizzutos needed a gesture. Something public, final, and symbolic. They didn't send flowers. They sent a message. Bobby's execution wasn't random. It was leverage, the cost of realigning an empire. He thought he was indispensable. They decided he was proof of control. Jealousy festered in the ranks, too. Some of the made men still loyal to Leo Rizzuto earned less than Bobby did in a week. They watched him flaunt money they couldn't touch, speak to people they couldn't reach, and act untouchable while they answered to men behind glass. Inside that pressure cooker, envy became justification. When detectives interviewed old associates, one of them said it plainly. He forgot he was a guest in someone else's kingdom. In this world, loyalty ends where money begins. But betrayal begins where trust once paid the bills. 5 days after the hit, the story finally turned inside out. Intelligence reports confirmed what the streets already suspected. The order hadn't just been approved from prison, it had been authored there. Inside Bordeaux prison, investigators traced an encrypted message leaving at 9:57 a.m., 1 hour before the shooting. It was relayed through a network of prepaid phones, bouncing towers from Montreal to Laval, before landing on a device registered to a man known only as Marco. Marco wasn't a shooter. He was a courier, the voice of the inside. That text contained just 3 words. Window is open. The rest was execution. The Rizzuto faction, led by Leo Rizzuto, wanted to send a single message to the streets. We can touch you anywhere. But the part no one saw coming came from the other side of the line. Surveillance logs showed Bobby's final meeting, 1 week before his death. Wasn't with a rival, it was with Martin Robert, the global head of the Hells Angels. The meeting took place in a Montreal industrial warehouse already under SQ surveillance. Audio was partial, but clear enough to make one thing certain. Bobby had been told the feud was cooled. He believed it. He'd been reassured that the biker world had nothing to do with the threats, that the Rizzuto family was still business only. What he didn't know was that both camps had already met, not to save him, but to coordinate how to erase him without starting another war. To them, his removal wasn't betrayal, it was balance. He'd become too independent to own, too connected to control, and too profitable to ignore. So they turned him into an example, a warning that even the middleman can't stay in the middle forever. The twist wasn't who killed him. It was who allowed it. The men who promised to protect him were the same ones who signed the contract. Theologou didn't lose a war. He was erased to prevent one. The case remains open, not for lack of evidence, but for lack of clarity. The Sûreté du Québec still calls it an active organized crime file. No arrests, no confessions, no one willing to name who gave the order. But every unanswered question cuts deeper than the last. Was this justice for the Dirty Diaz betrayal? A delayed act of revenge, signed off by the same bikers who once trusted him? Or did the Rizzuto family act alone, removing a broker who'd started speaking a little too freely, a little too far from their shadow? Who gains when a middleman dies? The bikers who reclaim control of supply lines, the Sicilians who silence a wild card, or the street crews who finally get to carve up territory without a referee. And then there's that moment the shooters hesitated. A split second before the first bullet left the barrel. Was that doubt? Was it loyalty? Or was it one final warning? A signal that even inside betrayal, there's still a code. In a world built on silence, the loudest truth is always the one nobody repeats. So who really wanted Bobby the Greek dead? The answer's somewhere between the men who ordered it and the men who pulled the trigger. In Montreal's underworld, ambition isn't rewarded. It's corrected. Charalambos Theologou thought he could build peace between men who only understood war. He tried to stand between empires and got crushed beneath both. For years, he made violence profitable. But the thing about controlling chaos is that eventually it controls you. Every phone call, every handshake, every favor. He thought they built protection. In reality, they built a cage. Theologou's story isn't just about a murder in a Laval café. It's about the illusion of safety when your enemies still answer your calls. In a world where trust is transactional and loyalty expires faster than fear, survival is never a skill. It's a grace period. The underworld doesn't forgive ambition. It buries it faster than any bullet ever could. In Quebec's shadows, one wrong alliance isn't a mistake. It's a sentence. And when the smoke clears, the only thing left of men like Bobby the Greek is the silence that follows their name. You're still here? Do what you meant to do earlier. Subscribe. And if you made it this far, you know what to do. Hit the bell. There are more cases like this coming. Cases where the truth is darker than any fiction. See you in the next one.